so nice to get a warm applause. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I'm here all the way from New York via Singapore, Shanghai, Hong Kong, and now Tokyo. Okay, good.
Okay, so I'd like to welcome you to this press conference given by Rebecca Fannin, who has just recently written her third book, which is Tech Titans of China. And if you Google her on in the internet, you will see that she has also written many, many articles on business issues, especially related to China and to technology. And she is a columnist for Forbes, I believe. Is that correct?
That's right.
And also is a consultant. And I believe are you also an entrepreneur as well?
Yeah, I'm a media entrepreneur.
Wow. Okay. So anyway, it's really nice to see someone who's actually understood the new business model, unlike our other members here, including myself. So thank you so much, and we look forward very much to your comments and to your especially comments about technology and China, which is the subject of your book. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Andrew. So I'd love to get an idea of who's here. Just how many of you have been to China already, more than once? Everybody here? Okay. And how many are doing business in China? And how many are covering China as a journalist?
I think there are a few.
A few? Okay. All right. Good. That gives me an idea here. Tech Titans of China is actually my third book. I didn't really start to do a series, but it ended up being a series because the first book was Silicon Dragon, which was about China's internet entrepreneurs and people like Jack Ma of Alibaba, and that's me with Jack in 2006 in Hangzhou at his office then. And Jack, I think he looks a lot better today. And he certainly dresses a lot better. And then the other person I'm with on the other picture is Kai-Fu Lee. And back then, Kai-Fu was running Google China, and he was fighting with Baidu, one of the Chinese tech titans. So 10 years is really a long time. A lot can happen in a decade. And in China, it all moves in super speed. So a lot happens, and a lot has happened. So the Chinese bought Baidu, Alibaba, Tencent have all grown up, and they've powered up. They've become active in many economic sectors beyond what their original business model was. And today, Tencent and Alibaba rank among the 10 most valuable publicly traded companies, which is very remarkable considering they're very young companies. And they came from China, have China roots and China founders and China markets. So it gives you an idea of what's been happening in China in the tech sphere. Now, their founders have also gone on to become billionaires. They are tech titans or tech tycoons in this case. Robin Li, the founder of Baidu, who is there on the left, and that's Joe Tsai in the middle. I took all these photos, by the way. That photo of Robin I took at Baidu World Congress in Beijing. The photo of Joe Tsai I took last year in Shanghai at 11/11. The third one is Pony Ma, the very reclusive Pony Ma, who doesn't really like to talk to the press very much. But Tencent is one of those very remarkable tech titans that's emerged. But from the original bot, the Baidu, Alibaba, Tencent, there's a whole new group of tech brands that have surfaced. And they are ByteDance. ByteDance is the maker of Toutiao and TikTok. And we all know that TikTok is the 15-second video app that's been, in some hot water, so to speak, in the US over potential censorship issues. So these Chinese tech companies are starting to get really global attention. Another one is Didi. It has sprung up as well. It's the Uber equivalent in China, and it actually beat Uber in China. Didi ended up absorbing the Uber business in China. The one in the middle with the scooters, the yellow scooters, that is Meituan. This is the super app. That is a new business model that's emerged in China that is not common in the West yet. So that on Meituan you can get instant food delivery, book hotels, check out restaurant recommendations, and it's more like a lifestyle app, but also ride on-demand delivery. The next one over is Xiaomi. That's me in front of Xiaomi's headquarters in Beijing, and Xiaomi is the Chinese smartphone maker that is considered the Apple of China, and it's very advanced in that it has a whole number of apps built into Xiaomi, and Xiaomi's a lot less expensive than the iPhone is. The last one is DJI, the drone company out of Shenzhen, southern China. DJI is very innovative. All of these companies are privately held still, except for Meituan. Actually, the two in the middle are not anymore because they just went public last year. Meituan went public last year in Hong Kong, and Xiaomi did too in Hong Kong. DJI is still private, the drone company from Shenzhen. It's the world-leading drone maker, and it has a 75% market share. So this is the new breed, and there's a lot more behind this. This is just the tip of the iceberg, these ones. But what's happened today is we've seen this idea from copy to China, which was the original model, to today copy from China. And in the middle was from copy to China, invented in China, to today copy from China. And this is what is happening today. This is in the headlines today. Facebook is copying WeChat and copying Toutiao. Amazon is, in a way, copying Alibaba and Alibaba's new retail. Starbucks is copying Luckin Coffee. Luckin Coffee is the upstart coffee brand in China that is growing really fast. It actually went public last year too in New York, and it is giving Starbucks a real challenge. And in fact, Starbucks is now copying the Luckin Coffee on-demand delivery model. Same thing with Lime Bike. Lime Bike is the bike-sharing company that started up in California. But I happen to know the founders of Lime Bike, and I know that they have China experience, and I know that they copied Mobike and Ofo. Mobike and Ofo were two of the originators in China of the bike-sharing model, and that was another made-in-China business model. Today, we are seeing these tech titans innovating faster, being copied, going global for the first time, and getting attention for going global. Their founders and their whole staff is working really hard. So if you're an entrepreneur, it's just a natural that you're going to work many, many hours and not get much sleep. But in China, this is all very exaggerated. So that this 996, it's known as 996 because it's 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. 6 days a week. But I think it's more like 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. 7 days a week. That's been my experience when I go to China, and I'm there regularly. I'm there quite often in Beijing, Shanghai, and Shenzhen, and elsewhere. And I have to say, it's really just nonstop. I think if you look at the history, you would say, yeah, okay, well, look, maybe not all this tech entrepreneurship that has happened in the past decade and a half from China, maybe it's not all that surprising, considering that China really has an entrepreneurial culture anyhow. And it was long suppressed, but it's now risen to the surface again. So China gave us a lot of today's very useful devices that that we use, such as paper, gunpowder, fireworks, the compass, the printing press. That's relevant here at the Foreign Correspondents Club. So a lot of new ideas were always bubbling forth from China. But today you have these new catalysts from China that are pushing it forward. You have the government from China wanting China to be a world leader in technology. And this Made in China 2025 has given China roles, designated roles by what time they're going to lead in what sectors. It's very, very defined. The whole Belt and Road Initiative that China has, making friends with its neighbors, making economic friends with its neighbors. It's something that the U.S. has not been very good at lately. Definitely not very good at lately. We're making enemies with Canada, Mexico, and other countries around the world. But China is making friends with its Belt and Road Initiative of building out infrastructure for other countries. And this is a rather controversial move because what happens is if those countries can't pay for that infrastructure, guess who ends up owning it? That China takes it over. So you could see ports or railroads or these kinds, or bridges being taken over by Chinese and other countries. I think some of the other catalysts that are pushing China's tech entrepreneurship forward are the enormous amount of capital that's gone in. Now, this is venture capital. Some of it is government spending, yes, sure. Some of it is government spending, but a large part of the tech boom, of this tech entrepreneurial boom, is from private sources, private venture capital. And that venture capital is from largely from the U.S. It originated from Sand Hill Road, which is Silicon Valley, right next to Stanford University, where all the venture capital firms have a base. So you talk about the infrastructure is really first rate in China, in many Chinese cities. It's far more sparkling and new, and just everything works right in China's major cities. This is not the case in the rural areas, but in the major cities like Shanghai, everything is up to date, and it helps these tech ideas move faster. And so I think that this is part of the whole catalyst that's pushing China forward, is that this speed and the pace, the consumer boom, all these young digitally savvy consumers in China, they take to new ideas really quickly. And if they don't like something, they also will discard of it very quickly too. So it's a great testing market for whatever will work digitally. Now, this photo of Hertz Lin of DCM Ventures, he is a venture capitalist and he splits his time between Shanghai and Beijing. He was also the founder of Sina, which was the Yahoo of China. So that was one of the original copy to China models. So Hearst is kind of guilty of that, but he made a lot of money doing that. And now he's a venture capitalist. But I took this photo of Hearst in Beijing at the New World Hotel, of him using two types of smartphones to kind of keep up with what's going on. So I don't know how many people here have two types of smartphones, but I certainly don't. Just having one is tough enough to keep up with, right? I think China has gotten ahead because it's leapfrogged. It never had a lot of the legacy systems that we have, that the West has. Cash. China leapfrogged over cash and has gone to mobile payments. Email's dead in China. Cash is dead in China. It's all WeChat. It's all mobile payments, Alipay, WeChat Pay. PCs never got the penetration level that they got in the West. So everyone went to mobile. So a lot of the new ideas that are coming from China today are around mobile apps. They're not around the internet. It's all about apps. Business cards have totally been replaced by QR codes. Shopping malls never really had a built-out shopping mall system in China. So look, they could go right to new retail. New retail is these brand new supermarkets and department stores that have all the latest gadgets built into them, like robots and mobile payments and augmented reality, so that you can look at whatever the ingredients of whatever is being on display. You can see when it was shipped, where it was shipped from, when it arrived, what's in it. So these are things that we really don't have in the West. Now, another idea that has come out of the new China is these mini shops, MINI shops, which are actually baked right into the super apps. So while you're on an app and you're doing messaging and you're chatting and you're video chatting and all that, you can also go on to these branded mini shops on WeChat. And this has become very popular just recently. And a lot of even Western brands have mini shops on these Chinese apps. I also point out that gas-powered engines were, the car was, when I remember when I first started going to Beijing and Shanghai, it was all bicycles, right? And then it became cars, and now it's becoming electric vehicles. So the car market, it just didn't have those years and years like Detroit had of everyone owning a gas-powered car, a Chrysler or Ford or whatever, or a Buick. Everyone had one, and some people had 2 of them or 3 of them. Well, in China, in some cases, their first vehicle is an electric vehicle. And so again, this is that whole leapfrogging aspect that I mentioned before. Mobility. This mobility is an area that is ripe for disruption, and it is being disrupted. You see high-speed trains, you see the longest sea bridge in the Greater Bay Area, you see the new airports. All of this is in forward motion, and China has a jump on that. It's leapfrogging because it didn't have the legacy systems. It didn't have the old roads that had to be repaved over and over again, or the old turnpikes that are just outdated today, or the old Amtrak. So high-speed trains are just everywhere in China today. We have gone to a new era of tech, where China is in all of these leading sectors of technology. 5G. 5G is the new telecom standard that's going to speed up all of our communications. AI. It is a foundational technology that will impact, and is already impacting, a lot of what we do in finance, in healthcare, in education, and other fields as well. Speech recognition, facial recognition. China's getting ahead in AI, and it's implementing it faster, because China doesn't have these real data privacy issues that are so prominent in Europe and the US, for instance. China has gotten ahead in some cases in biotech, because also, again, there are fewer restrictions around what can be done. So, things like the first gene-edited babies came out of China. Space exploration, exploring the dark side of the moon, flying passenger drones. Drones, that's one there on the left from a company called Ehang, which has a drone that you can actually fly in. So that's launched just recently. The sharing economy. So in China today, it's always been, a sharing society, but sharing has really taken off, just not only from bikes, but shared umbrellas, shared battery chargers. So the sharing economy is very strong. Another aspect of this tech boom is the social credit system in China, where you get a score based upon your behavior, basically. If you do something naughty, that counts against you. If you do something good, well, that also can count. But if you get too many negatives, that can actually restrict you from getting credit, from buying train tickets. So let's say you're out here jaywalking. They have cameras all over that are watching everything. So that's going to get recorded, and all of a sudden you've got a bad score for that. If you don't repay your loan, then that's another thing that's a huge negative, and that'll be taken into account. So this social credit system is becoming part of China's culture, and it's accepted in China like it's not accepted in the West, but it's accepted in China. Now, I do think that there are certain sectors that China is catching up in. It has a long way to go before it can really rival the West. And one of these areas is semiconductors, those chips that make all of our devices work. And the other is aerospace. So China doesn't really have a Boeing or an Airbus yet. But that could be coming. I mentioned before how digitally savvy China's market is, and I think we have seen a lot of these new business models that are very much centered around the mobile app. So you have mobile entertainment, you have mobile payments, you have social commerce, which is built on mobile. Social commerce is, again, another new idea from China with a company called Pinduoduo. It's an upstart from China. It's almost 4 years old now, but it's already the #2 commerce app in China, just right behind Alibaba. And the reason it's caught up so quickly is that because it makes shopping online really fun. You can chat with your friends on there. You can share deals with your friends. And the more people you get in to do a group buy, the bigger the discount is. And then people get instant prizes, and it all becomes like a game. And you're all shopping online and wasting your time and buying more and more. So this is the Pinduoduo model from China. Now, I already mentioned super apps. It's a China business model, and Meituan is a good example of it, and so is WeChat. Now, look, today, if we were all reading the newspapers and watching television and radio, this is a big theme today. These two superpowers of U.S. and China competing with one another. The U.S. feels threatened by China's rise and has put blocks on sales to Chinese companies such as Huawei. There are new restrictions on selling to Chinese AI companies. There are new restrictions on foreign investments by China into the U.S. And the U.S. was a very active investor into many of the leading companies that came out of Silicon Valley, like Tesla even, like Uber, like Lyft, like Magic Leap. So many of the leading tech brands the Chinese were behind. They were investing heavily in, but not anymore because the U.S. is pushing China back, saying, okay, enough is enough. This has got to stop. And they're putting restrictions on venture capital investments. So before, if this is getting too deep into, this is happening now, and that's why I'm paying some attention to it right now, because all of these things are in motion right now, and they could go to a much more advanced level and really push China back. So this is what we're facing right now. There's talk of potential ban on listings of Chinese companies in the U.S. Look, this isn't the first time that China's felt threatened, right? Remember the 1990s, right? Japan in Rockefeller Center, Japan in Pebble Beach. And so now, China is not that high profile of an investor. It's been a little under the radar, but now because Washington, D.C. is making it a real prominent issue and Trump is pushing back, it's become a mainstream issue and a political issue. It's become politicized. And it's become popular in the U.S. To say China is stealing. China has an unfair advantage. China never really had competition from the West because China restricted it. China didn't allow Google or Facebook or Twitter or some media companies in, for that matter, either. And they're all blocked today. So you go to China, and there's no way you can get on them. You have to go to the Chinese equivalent, or you have to have a VPN to get on. And even sometimes with a VPN, you still can't get in. It'll be blocked. Depending upon what's happening in Beijing that day or in Shanghai, if there's a big government meeting, So on this idea of the unfair advantage, that this is how the West sees it, this is how Washington, D.C. is seeing it today, and this is playing out as a news angle today, an unfair advantage that China's had, and we're not going to take it anymore. We are going to push back on this forced technology transfer that's been going on for the longest time. We are going to push back on this whole idea of the copying of U.S. models. And look, and you know, if you look at some of these drivers of China's tech growth, then you realize that the U.S. really doesn't have an equivalent. So some of these unfair advantages stem from the government pushing money into technology and making China a world leader, or moving toward a world leader. So on the unfair advantage, I usually argue that, okay, yeah, sure, I agree that China had an unfair advantage and used it against Western companies. But on the other hand, when you saw Western companies go in to China, they largely failed. Uber was fighting with Didi for many years, and then finally surrendered because the money losses were so huge. They got into a huge price-cutting war. Same thing with eBay and Alibaba. Alibaba just trounced eBay. Baidu won the market battle against Google. Google could not localize as well in search as Baidu could, and Baidu had a superior search algorithm than Google did. So in each one of these cases, you know, it's partly on the failure of the managerial failure of these companies, these American multinational companies. It wasn't just that the unfair advantage, it was that there were also managerial mistakes, sending in managers who didn't speak the language, causing them to get okay from California for every minor decision that was made. And so this helped the Chinese companies solidify their lead. And today, in many cases, there's no catching up. It would be impossible for eBay to take the lead over Alibaba, or Amazon to take the lead over Alibaba in China. That's gone. Alibaba owns it, and Alibaba is going global into many other countries as well. So same thing with Didi. Didi is the ride-hailing company that beat Uber. Didi is no longer just in China. They're moving into Southeast Asia, and they're taking the same business model into Southeast Asia. And you know, it's very interesting that not only did this Uber-Didi battle happen in China, but it happened in Southeast Asia too. And Didi won in both cases. Now, I think that we could see more U.S. companies or Western companies failing in China. The WeWork model, we all know that WeWork's already in trouble, right? And is fighting a very fierce local challenger in Commune. Now, I've met the founder of Commune, and I wouldn't want to do business against him for anything. So WeWork has its work cut out for it, trying to catch some of the new innovative ideas that Commune has, like facial recognition to get into the workspace, and color-coded, and more digitalization built into each one of its desks, so that the desk becomes a movable office. Is no longer just a co-working space, but it's kind of a co-working desk that can be transported to wherever you are. Okay, are you still with me?
Yes, I think so.
Okay, so there are a lot of indicators of China's rise, and I go through those in the book. It's very detailed on some of these issues, like patents, China, and again, I want to emphasize that in each one of these headings, it's really China and the U.S. battling. There's no other market that compares. It's China and the U.S. on patents, scientific papers, R&D spending, venture capital investment, venture capital funding, unicorns, IPOs. I think I may have lost my voice on that overseas flight from Hong Kong last night. Okay. There you see the patent and how it stacks up on patent applications. China and the US are really close. And then there's Japan, which is in there too. And interestingly enough, Huawei is the top filer for new patents globally. Mitsubishi is second, so there's Japan again. Yay, Japan. China, the World Intellectual Property Organization out of Geneva says that China could surpass the US within 2 years if this trend keeps going. Because then I've been watching it go for several years, because I remember when China was ranked 12th in the world, now it's ranked second. So there, I think this is just a leading indicator. These are leading indicators that I'm showing you right now. This is national R&D spending. It's U.S., China. Japan is in there again, third. National Science Board says China could surpass the U.S. within 2 years if the current trends continue. On academic scientific research papers, it's again U.S. and China. This is all documented in the book, so with footnotes and everything. So a lot of work. Venture investment, China ranks second, right up there next to the U.S. and growing faster. Coming out of nowhere not that long ago in 2010. And as you can see here, China and the U.S. have more than 2/3 of the global spending of venture cap. This is the spending that goes into startups. This is the venture capital fundraising for startups. There's a larger gap here between China and the U.S., but again, it is a China and U.S. story. And it is a story that has evolved quite a bit over the past 15 years, because 15 years ago, some of the legendary leaders like Don Valentine of Sequoia Capital said that China, or Sequoia, was never going to be investing in China because it's just too far. It's just too risky to, because they always did the 50-mile radius. That's as far as they felt comfortable to go. But then things began to change. This dragon boat, these are some of the leaders of that venture capital wave that went to China, that went to Asia too. They went to India. They went to China and India about the same time. But China is the one that has produced the biggest results so far. I think India is coming on strong now, finally. Anyhow, maybe some of you recognize a few of these faces in here. Tim Draper's in there. Lip Bhutan from Walden. Charles River Ventures, Bill Ty, and a few others. Of course, we have here at SoftBank. I think SoftBank has driven a large part of this China boom as well. So, definitely, SoftBank. From this venture capital spending, they're become the superstar venture capitalist. And so, I write for Forbes, and I get involved in some of the research, like the Forbes Asia 30 Under 30 and the Forbes Asia Rich List. But here on the Forbes Midas list, the Midas list is the list of the top 100 performing venture capitalists in the world. And for the past 2 years, the number one has been Neil Shen, who's there on the left, of Sequoia Capital China. And he lives in Hong Kong, but he spends most of his time in Beijing or Shanghai. And I took that photo of Neil at his office in Hong Kong. Then on the right is Hans Tong from GGV Capital holding the microphone, and looking on is his former partner and really a boss, Gary Rochelle of Qiming. So again, these are some of the superstar venture capitalists who have made billions. Okay.
So, excuse me.
Unicorns.
We need to move to Q&A.
Okay, I'll just take you through this one or two more slides of the leading indicators, and we'll stop there. Unicorns. Okay, there you go. Unicorns. China, India. ByteDance is number one. IPOs. 31 Chinese companies went public in New York last year. Whether this is going to continue again this year, doubtful. 4 of the top U.S. IPOs last year were from China. What could go wrong? All this stuff. So I think this is probably a good place to end, because we are seeing this playing out now of the splinter net and the tech Cold War and the blocks on cross-border capital flows and this whole parallel tech universe that's starting to happen because of the security concerns and the restrictions and the ban on sales. And we have seen the deals just dry up. China to U.S. and the pivot now is to Southeast Asia and Israel. So again, just leading edge trends. I was going to speak about Israel a little bit earlier today, but there's definitely Alibaba's in Israel, China capital's going to Israel. The splinter net. That's what's happening today, is the splinter net. 2 superpowers fighting, 2 worlds of technology emerging. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rebecca Fannin. You've certainly given us more than a tour d'horizon. You've given us a wealth of information about China and about recent U.S.-China issues. Now, I'd like to open the floor first to working press people, or also to students of journalism, and then afterwards to the to industry. But do we have anybody from the press who would like to ask a question right now? If so, please raise your hand. If not, then we will move to people in the field. Can I see any questions?
I want to point out that the second half of the book goes through these tech sectors that I think matter most. And each one of them has a company that is profiled in that tech sector. So if facial recognition, sense time, and so forth. You can see it all here.
Well, if there are no questions, I'll just use the chair's prerogative to ask a question. You mentioned a number of issues that are, at least in the short term, to China's advantage. For example, the absence of regulations to protect private information,
right,
and how this, of course, very much plays into the hands of data mining
right.
industries and so on. And of course, but we're now seeing playing out in Hong Kong a reaction to the kind of political system which China has, which has evolved in China, which seems to work in the favor of business, but the question is it sustainable given the reactions which we can expect from people who are used to a freer society? And you also mentioned, for example, the fact that China was very good with its neighbors in the Belt and Road policy. However, we've also seen a reaction against this in a number of South Asian countries, notably Sri Lanka,
yeah.
and also in the Maldives and so on,
Mm-hmm.
where it resulted in a change in government. So the question I'm going to ask you is, this seems to be like a really a fast-moving train, but are the tracks really straight?
Yeah, they're definitely not straight. It's more like a roller coaster today, because it's become a politicized issue. And we do have a lot of economic factors weighing in, a slowing economy, some aspects of China's domestic market that are friction points. The income inequality, for one, and the educational system that is more, a black and white type of educational training, and the slowdown of the economic growth. So, yeah, you are seeing this unraveling that used to be a lot of collaboration and cooperation between cross-border, which benefited both countries, actually, both China and the U.S. and the world, where ideas would come together and they would both innovate together, but now they're innovating separately more often than not. And like Huawei's developing its own operating system because the U.S. has said, well, they're not going to allow the Google Android system to be used any longer. So yeah, I mean, it's more like a roller coaster today. It's really not a straight path. But I have to say that I'm actually very surprised by, having covered this field for about 15 years or more, I'm amazed at the progress that has been made. I never could have predicted that these companies would rise this fast and become prominent around the world.
Do I see any hands? Anybody who has yes, I do see a hand. There, yes. The gentleman with the hand at the very end. Thank you. Can you please pass the microphone there? And could you please identify yourself? Sure, why not? Okay.
Hello, my name is Oliver Matthew from CLSA. Two questions. One is actually a request. You ran through your slide on the risks, but that was very interesting. So maybe after you answer my question, could you talk through some of the issues you see? And the question is about ByteDance.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, you mentioned the drone company and one other, Xiaomi. I mean, Xiaomi is not really globally successful, and drones is kind of B2B maybe. I don't know about the B2C, but I'd be very interested to hear your views on how ByteDance has managed to be a genuinely globally successful consumer-facing platform, because I think that's the first time ever. Is it the management, technology? What drove that? And if you've looked into the background of that company, could you tell us more about that? Thanks.
Yeah, well, one of the things that they did was create a China version and a rest of the world version, so that the China version, everything in China is censored. It needs to be censored. So this allowed them to take an uncensored model. That was a very innovative idea, and take it global. But another thing that allowed them to jumpstart their revenues and their traction was buying another company. They bought Musical.ly, which already had 800 million users, and then they absorbed that. And Musical.ly was already very popular in the West, and so you combined, the East and the West, and then you have this huge ecosystem of the 15-second video app, and then it was like it snowballed. It became something that was on comic shows, on talk shows, on the Tonight Show, for instance, and it just became very addictive because it had this built-in AI system that could pick up your preferences, your viewing preferences, and then keep feeding you more of them. It's like, oh, chocolate. Oh, let me have more chocolate. Let me have more of that. And so, I'm not into it myself, but I know others who are, and they do say it's addictive. Now, their founder was again a serial entrepreneur. So what you are seeing today in China is the rise of these serial entrepreneurs who already had their first success, and now they're on to their second one. Maybe they had a failure along the way, but there's experience now from China in the tech world. It's Jack Ma, when he started out, he really didn't have much experience. But now today, if somebody, some of these leading edge companies, like the guy behind Xiaomi, he's done about 8 startups, at least. And he's an angel investor too. I mean, some of these people are amazing, really.
I think there was a second part of that question.
Oh, what was it?
Could you go over your,
There it is, yeah. Yeah, I mean, some of these are domestic issues, domestic to China. And others are these tension points over the tech rivalry. And I think we are seeing the blocks on venture capital spending from China coming into the U.S. So that some U.S. startups that had China capital before, they can't get that China capital again. Some Chinese venture funds that were set up to invest in the U.S., they're no longer doing that. They're going back to China. So that's the venture capital aspect of it. Then you see these parallel tech universes, like with the rollout of 5G, countries are deciding if they'll go with a 5G system from Huawei or a different, company's supplier. So again, that's a parallel tech universe. You already have it in some ways because you have a censored internet in China and an uncensored internet pretty much everywhere else around the world. These security concerns I've been out on the media circuit quite a bit, and the number one question is, are they stealing from us? There's really, you hear incidences, there've been lawsuits, there's a lot of back and forth of technology exchange. And when one engineer walks to another company, the brain doesn't stop, at the doorstep. So, how do you get a handle on these kind of privacy issues and secret or trade patents? Tesla has sued some of the Chinese electric vehicle makers because they say they're stealing their self-driving technology. So all of these issues are today in the press. The ban on the AI. You asked me to go into detail on this, so I'm going into detail on it. But the Chinese AI companies, there's several of them that were hit by this, and some of them are very fast-moving companies that were hit because of a regulatory issue over surveillance technologies, right? Not all of them were in that surveillance technology business in the West, in the west of China, but they've all been kind of cast with that issue. So it's going to really, I think, impede the progress of Chinese AI companies if they cannot get critical components from the U.S. that they have been relying on to some degree.
Yes, the gentleman here at the very front.
My name is Kurt Sieber. I'm an associate member. The world is moving now with the relationship between China and the United States. My question is, how do you see the development of the relationship between China and Japan? Thank you.
Well, SoftBank has certainly been a driver of some of the Chinese tech innovation and the capital that's gone into Chinese companies. Besides SoftBank, at least in the tech world, at least tech investment world, I don't see nearly as much cross-border fertilization as I do with China and Southeast Asia or China and the U.S. So I don't see it as much of an issue. I mean, I guess it is there, but with the leading Japanese companies that are in China. Is there a distrust of Chinese products here in Japan, like there is in the U.S.? Do Japanese, they don't want to buy a Tesla, or they don't want to buy a Chinese electric vehicle maker like NIO, because they're worried that maybe it's going to be spying on them, or they don't want to. I heard somebody yesterday say that they were using WeChat for a conference call, and it was a multi-country conference call, and all of a sudden, somebody got on the line and said, "Why are you talking about that?" And so somebody was listening, actually. That's amazing. And so I said, well, what if you can't use WeChat and you can't use WhatsApp? Because, see, this is, again, one of these parallel universes that some countries like WhatsApp and some countries like WeChat. So China is very big on WeChat, but India likes WhatsApp. And I hear we have Kakao, right? Is it Kakao or what is it?
No, it's Line here.
Line, okay. Korea is
Korea.
Cow.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, so each country kind of has its favorite messaging app. And, but anyhow, I guess, I'm not sure exactly how to answer that question. I I don't see the Japanese-China angle on this playing out as much as I do with other markets.
Yeah. Okay, can I have another question, please?
China-Israel is a very active pipeline right now.
Actually, if you would like to talk about that, that would be very interesting. We haven't heard that before.
Okay.
Okay.
So China-Israel, China capital, since it's not, these deals are not getting approval by Washington, D.C. For instance, Alibaba tried to buy MoneyGram in the U.S. and that was blocked. And so other deals are being blocked now too in the U.S. over security reasons by Chinese. And so the Chinese are saying, okay, we can't get our deals done in the U.S. Where are we going to go? Well, that's a big tech powerhouse. And of course, that's Israel. And Israel loves it because Israel needs capital, and the Israeli startups, they need a market to go to, and China's got the market. So it's a two-way win-win. China capital coming in, Israelis going to China for the market, and cross-border innovation happening. So Alibaba has already done 4 major deals in Israel. Big data, safe driving, QR codes, mass transit software, and they've set up an R&D lab in Israel. So China capital is going into Israeli venture capital firms. Sorry.
Okay, can I follow up that one? To what degree is this a shopping spree? I mean, a pilgrimage to the holy land of electronic knowledge, technology,
Yeah.
and to what degree is it a collaborative effort in which the two sides are putting in their mutual knowledge of technology? Because Israel has been very well known for essentially selling off-the-shelf items or almost ready to market.
Mm-hmm. China's Israel's startup nation is what it's known as, and there's definitely is a breeding ground for new innovations and very tech intensive kinds of technologies. Not the easy wins, but things that require a lot of R&D spending. So I think we have seen Google has gone in there, Microsoft is, and the American companies are going in too, and they're benefiting and they're setting up R&D labs in Israel. And so China's doing the same thing too. So Alibaba just set up a big R&D lab in Israel. So they are, I think, leveraging the know-how of the Israeli talent. And so, when you get off the plane in Tel Aviv, the first thing you feel is the brain waves, right? You do. So, you have Technion there and just massive talent, engineering talent in Israel. So, on security issues to a large degree as well.
If I don't see any more hands, what I'd like to ask, oh yes, I do see a hand. Okay, good.
Okay, thank you for your presentation. I'm Ima Hashi from the Nikkei, and I think that 5G is the most timely issue. And as 3 Chinese telecom companies started to offer some services of 5G last month. So I would like you to share your view on 5G and how China is going to take initiative for the 5G era.
Right, yeah. Well, 2 of the major 5G telecom operators, equipment makers, are from China. So you have Huawei and ZTE, and then Nokia and Ericsson, and those are the 4 leaders. But Huawei is out in front because it has not only the equipment, but it also has it's making smartphones as well. So it has both elements of it. And as the developing world starts to embrace 5G, Huawei could come in and package a 5G system and get in. and win the market. So right now in Europe, there's not the same kind of defense mechanism against Huawei that there is in the West. The U.S. is never going to go with Huawei, but Europe is. I mean, Germany just decided it will go with. It will go with Huawei. So the choice will be, and is happening right now. Can you trust Huawei? Are there security systems that you can put in place to say, okay, we'll get Huawei in, but we'll have these monitoring systems to make sure it's safe, to make sure there's not this, spying and everything. So, it's a really interesting development, because 5G is, like you said, one of the leading technologies of the future. And we're right on the cusp of that now, where it's going to go into all of our devices and make us even more connected than we are today, which could be really bad. But our devices will all be talking to one another. It will help the development of self-driving cars, and because of the speeding up of these systems. Watch 5G, and then 6G is right behind it.
Do you want to follow up on that? No. Thank you. Okay, thank you. Yes. You have a question? Ah, yes. I think I see a working press member, or is it someone just with pressing work? I don't know.
My name is Baumgartner. I'm working for Swiss Television and Radio France in Tokyo. I wanted to ask you, Silicon Valley companies which have close links with Chinese high-tech companies, do you think they will delocate some of their research and development laboratories to China to avoid the obstacles from the U.S. administration? And I have another question. You said, can we trust Huawei? But Edward Snowden has told us also to ask similar questions regarding Cisco system or other American companies. So what is your opinion about it? Thank you.
Okay, so there's two questions in there. And the first one is, on technology, look, there's always a lot of trading of information. You could call it trading, but exchanging of information back and forth. And it's really hard to keep secrets. And with today's fast-moving digital world, and the talent that's moving around from country to country and company to company, it becomes a tougher issue to keep the controls on and to keep your own patents protected. So in China today, I think there has been an argument made that China's become better at intellectual property protection because they now have some of their own innovations to protect. So there's not as much of this outright stealing that was going on before, because before it was kind of like, well, this is okay to do. We're just, everybody's doing it, and let's just do it. And they were all a lot copying. So, but today that kind of really brutal kind of cultural, whatever you call it, I don't know what to call it, but habit or operating mode is not nearly as pronounced as it was. So I think, what was the first part of the question?
To what degree can you trust either Huawei or Cisco?
Well, I mean, I think that was what I was trying to answer. It's really hard to know. It's really hard to get a smoking gun. The FBI right now is investigating like 1,000 cases of cybersecurity theft, and a large number of them point to China. But it's really hard to get that smoking gun, and Huawei continues to say, we're not guilty, we're not guilty, we're not doing this, and the U.S. says, yes, you are doing this. And so where's the smoking gun? It depends on, I don't know, it's very hard to get a very clear-cut answer to that. I mean, definitely, if you look at the Huawei-Cisco thing, there was a huge legal battle between Huawei and Cisco, but that dates back probably 20 years now. I don't know, 15 years ago. Cisco won that. And then T-Mobile and Huawei have been in a lawsuit where T-Mobile filed a suit against Huawei for stealing its mobile testing systems. And that's going, I don't think that one's actually been gone to court yet, so watch that one. But yeah, this continues to be a real big issue of whether the Chinese can be trusted from the Western perspective.
Yes.
Not when I'm in Asia, I don't hear this nearly as much, and I've been in Asia now on the book tour for about almost a month. I just don't, when I go back to the US, that's the only thing I hear. And it gets a little frustrating if you go on Squawk Box and they just ask you, aren't they stealing from us? So like, wow, that's your first question? Okay.
Well, do I see any more hands? If not, then we've come to the end of the hour. And I want to thank Rebecca Fannin for sharing her insights and information with us. And this is her book. If you are interested in it, I think she has a few copies which you can purchase at the American price, which is probably better than the Japanese one.
Oh yeah, and you can get a signed copy too.
Okay, all right.
So, well, thank you very much. I appreciate it. Just one other thing which I didn't get to because we ran out of time, but because I was so slow in getting you through the history out of it. But SiliconDragonVentures.com is the website that I've created as my own little media business, where we have our events, our videos, our newsletter, my Forbes column, all my other freelance stuff, and the books and some thought leadership papers on there as well. So Silicon Dragon Ventures, if you are interested in this story, recommend you check it out. Okay, thank you again.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.